Welcome back. This is Bando's Breakdown to episode 16 with your host, Zain Bando. Very glad to be here. Hope you all are enjoying your Wednesday afternoon. Should be a fun show today. Again, if you don't know the drill by now, it's me, 45 minutes unfiltered, all of my favorite takes in the world of sports, all of my favorite opinions. Try to do something a little bit different where it is a solo show where you get me and my most authentic self possible. But before we get into all of the madness that is going to be the show for Wednesday, August 7th, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. This is very important. We have been a content machine over for the last 2 to 3 months now, both over on the YouTube side and on the Playback side, which we'll get to in just a second. But if you could please go to youtube.com/ETP Network, that would be very much appreciated as we are slowly but surely approaching the 1,000 subscriber mark. That is very important for all of us as the channel continues to grow and as the algorithm continues to find all of you. This show is simply just an extension of that. And as I just said, my name is Zain Bando. You may know me as the co-host of the MMA Outsiders. You may also know me as a as a relatively busy freelance sports journalist for a lot of different sites, most notably the Sporting News. May not have also written for some other sites previously, including BJPen.com, Sports News Highlights, and a couple of others. So if you know me from the journalism side as well, welcome over to the audio and video side. Again, you get to see a different side of me here. So I'm very happy to be a part of it. You can also listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so much more. This is very important as there are multiple different mediums to listen or to watch. So if you are listening on the audio only platforms, be sure to go over to the YouTube home, do the inverse of that, and so much more. Very much appreciated for how you guys can follow the podcast in multiple different ways. You can also follow the podcast across social media app and do a breakdown where all of the major clips are posted to all the different social platforms. We are on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X as well. So all the major social medias are covered there. You get to see all of the best clips from every single episode of this show. So if you've not followed us on social media, be sure to go do that. A lot more clips to come, including some extra bonus content for you guys later this week, which should be pretty exciting as well. And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our wonderful sponsor, Playback, which also sponsors this show and every other show on the network. So without further ado, here we go. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together, and of course, you can go to playback.tv/EZP Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. We just had the United States wrap up their Olympic quarterfinal game against Brazil, so thank you to everyone who tuned into that yesterday. Looking forward to doing more Olympics coverage as that wraps up, as well as other sports down the line as we get closer and closer to the fall with college football and the NFL season approaching, as well as eventually the NBA, the NHL, and all of the major combat sports that will be taking place to conclude 2024. So let's get right into the intro here. We have a packed show, but a brief show at the same time. We've got a lot to go over. We got some boxing nuggets in here this week. Got to preview UFC Vegas 95, even if it isn't the greatest card in the world. Got to go over some major Olympics topics that have been taking place throughout the festivities, particularly with Team USA and a couple of the other sports that are going on. We're going to be going over the NFL preseason and week 1 and how to watch all those. We're going to go over some NFL over-under win totals, specifically for the NFC South. This week, we're going to try to do every division in the NFC and the AFC leading up to September when the Ravens take on the Chiefs in week 1. So that'll be very exciting. And we're also going to go over a few other additional items in the world of college athletics. So it should be a good show. this week. I'm excited to get started. So let's get into it here with Zan's overview. We're going to start in the world of boxing. We're going to start over the weekend. We had a major fight take place. Terence Crawford going for 4 titles in a decision win over Ismail Hedromov in a fight that was actually relatively close. The scorecards were 116, 112, and then 2 115, 113 scorecards. So a very, very close fight. Arguably the toughest fight of Madrimov's career, even though he looked tremendous while doing it. Some people, including Eddie Hearn, actually thought he won the fight. But to me, I think Crawford took the last couple of rounds to win a close decision. So I do think the judges got it right. However, I do think that 116, 112 was a little bit of a lopsided score. If you haven't seen the fight, my biggest recommendation is to go back and watch the highlights. It was the least entertaining Crawford fight, at least in a couple of years now. Nowhere near how he looked against Earl Spence and some of his other opponents. Madrimov took that fight seriously and should be very proud of the efforts that he put in to his performance, and just the way he went out there conducting himself was total class. Wants an eventual rematch, but now the story is going to shift to a comment that Terence Crawford made after the fight, and he said, "If the money is right," referring to Canelo Alvarez, who will be fighting Edgar Berlanga in Las Vegas, September 14th, same night as UFC 306. We're going to talk about UFC 306 in a little bit, but Canelo is going to be a major part of that puzzle too, because he has to fight Edgar Berlanga, and in the shadows of that fight is this potentially big super fight at 168 between Crawford and Alvarez, which to me would be the biggest non-heavyweight boxing match. And this is a bold statement, but I'm going to say it because the hype potentially built around this fight feels that important. To me, it's the biggest non-heavyweight title fight since Pacquiao Mayweather in 2015. I think it has the level to do some killer pay-per-view numbers if marketed and promoted the right way. And the retractors on Crawford that I don't really agree with is, people are saying that there's ducking and all this stuff on both sides. I think that both guys know what they're worth. Both guys know that they're two of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. Canelo is, without a doubt, the one of the top 3 best boxers in the last 15 years. Uh, Crawford feels that he's owed a certain amount of money. I can't blame him. I mean, when is the last time you've seen someone from Omaha, Nebraska, which is where he's from, or one of these obscure Midwestern states or state like Wyoming or Idaho that people don't really give too much credit to? When was the last time you saw someone from a non-major market in professional fighting dominate the way that Crawford has? I mean, to be 41-0 is downright nasty, and to to uh to play his cards right and to play his leverage right and to get the Earl Spence fight when he got the Earl Spence fight, despite all the delays, despite all the back and forth. Crawford is doing things that he has always said he would do for several years. And I just feel like you have to respect him for that. You have to understand that this is a guy, he realized that this is a business. He can just take any fight he wants. If he wants to fight Canelo eventually, he wants to do it for the most amount of money. I can't blame him for that. And Canelo knows that he doesn't. Canelo knows that he doesn't even have to fight him. His legacy is so set in stone now. He's fought all the best boxers in the world that he probably feels like he doesn't even deserve to give Crawford an opportunity. So hopefully Turki Al-Sheikh can get this fight done. He wants to get this fight done. He's made it very clear. He made it very clear on the broadcast that an offer has been thrown out there. He wants to make this fight a reality. The question is can Saudi Arabia, can Turki Al-Sheikh, can these guys come together again and deliver what would be one of the biggest fights of the year that isn't a Fury Usyk rematch? My prediction is, they're gonna get this fight done at some point. I don't think it's gonna be in 2024. I think 2024, already, at its halfway point, or over its halfway point rather. And Canelo already has a fight coming up in September. If you really wanted to do that fight, you'd have to hope that Canelo got out of the Berlanga fight unscathed. And if he doesn't get out of there unscathed, uh, um, 2025 to me would be the most logical time frame to do a fight of that sort. So just something to keep in mind to answer the initial question in the banner. Yeah, absolutely, it's the fight to make. It's just a matter of when this fight could take place, not a matter of if, because these guys have proven that they deserve to fight each other. They're two of the best fighters um on the planet in their respective division. And I think it's important to understand too that boxing is getting to a place where you got to start to make these bigger fights, to keep the casual audience engaged and whatnot. So again, I do think this will occur. Again, it's just a matter of when the fight will occur, not a matter of if. So we're gonna quickly transition over to the Olympics now. So bearing in mind that this is recording the day of the game against Brazil, the quarterfinal match, just gonna go over my brief thoughts on Team USA hoops and just how they've been able to play together. I really like this team a lot. They've had some flack for, have they played down to their competition? Did they struggle a little bit against South Sudan? Yeah, they did. There were times that they did, but I just feel like when you have NBA level leadership, when you have guys, like LeBron James and Steph Curry, and you have guys that are stepping up in big situations. Bam Adebayo being another one. You have NBA stars everywhere. There's no reason why this Team USA team can't win the gold with who's remaining. I mean, I think personally the most interesting the most interesting the most interesting pairing I think going into this is going to be, could Team USA hang with someone like a Canada, or like Australia, or even a Greece for that matter. I think it's a very interesting field, and I think it's something that people I think are overlooking, is that these other is that by the way, speaking of, Canada was able to edge Spain 88 to 85 earlier in the morning at the time that we're recording this. So at the very least, Canada is still alive for a potential gold medal game against the United States, and that's a game I'd like to see. This Canada team is super resilient. They have NBA talent on their side too, including Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. That would be a very interesting matchup, and that's the matchup that I'm genuinely rooting for. If you want to see the most NBA talent on two sides of a basketball floor, that's the game that I think a lot of people would get excited about. It would ignite both countries. It would be good. I mean, that is something that I would totally sign up for. I would love to see that potentially be a gold medal game, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much further Team USA goes. Assuming that they make the Final Four as the perennial favorite to win the gold medal. But I think this is one of the most exciting storylines in all of the Olympics. Let's see if Team USA can get this done, because they have the team to do it and they have the talent to do it. So I think that anyone who has yet to pay attention to Team USA and what they're all about, they should, because the, this is one of those teams that I think, if they can win a gold medal, can go down in Olympic history as one of the best Team USA men's basketball teams of all time. Which is just something to keep in mind there as well. We're going to transition back over to combat sports now. We're going to move into UFC Vegas 95 from the UFC Apex. Probably most of you that are listening to this right now, probably if you're a longtime MMA fan, probably forgot that this card was even taking place. So just to give you the scope as to what this card could look like, it is a rematch of a heavyweight fight that took place pre-COVID between Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak. So let's dig into this quick programming note here. For those of you that are obsessed with following me on social media, you know that I finished 11-2 on UFC Saudi Arabia last week. That was the best overall record of the year so far through nearly 30 UFC events. So very, very proud of that. Currently sitting at 180, 140, and 4 on UFC predictions this year. So 40 fights above 500. Cannot complain about that, considering that after UFC 299, I was sitting at 48, 49, and 2. So can't complain. Had some rough weeks in June as well as July, but to start August out with an 11-2 mark, along with my co-host of the MMA Outsiders and our executive producer. Shout out to both of them for all of us to start 11-2. That's got to feel good, considering that when you look at the MMA odds breaker predictions, which has listed some of the best MMA insiders in the sport, the three of us combined actually beat a couple of them. So I'm pretty darn proud of that from that perspective. But moving over to UFC Vegas 95, it's another UFC Fight Night installment from the Apex. Let's go over the stakes. It takes place this Saturday, August 10th. We have a total currently of 10 fights on the card. Could end up being 11 because there's new developments of a potentially new fight. So that'll be interesting as well. And we have a exclusive linear ESPN card. So it's one of these rare cards where you can see the whole thing on ESPN or ESPN Plus. So very, very exciting for those of you who are non-subscribers to any of those services. So that's really good. But looking more at the main event here, so obviously a pretty important fight in the heavyweight division. We got Tybura sitting at 25-8. We got Sergey Spivak sitting at 16-4 overall. And as I said, this is a fight that took place a couple years ago. Tybura was able to win by decision. Let's take a look at some of the numbers here according to Tapology. And again, if I give you the odds, that means that the odds will likely change. So just keep that in mind. Let's take a look here at the tail of the tape. Again, Tybura, 25-8 overall. Spivak's hitting at 16-4. Tybura has won 3 out of his last 5. Same goes for Spivak. And to make things even more interesting, they're to make things even more interesting, Tybura is coming off of a win against Tai Tuivasa, and Sergey Spivak has not fought in almost a year, losing to Cyril Gane in his last fight. Again, this was almost a year ago. So very important fight considering the scope of the heavyweight division and where things currently sit. What's going on with Tom Aspinall? What's going on with John Jones? What's going to happen potentially in other divisions with guys moving up. Very, very important fight for both of these guys to stay in the mix. Let's take a look at Tybura's resume really quick outside of the Spivak fight. And just so you guys are aware, I'm gonna pick this fight in just a minute, but you'll be able to see the rest of my predictions along with my co-host and producer Saturday when we put them out the morning of the event. So for those of you who are looking for the full slate, you only have to wait a few more days to see the full slate. So taking a look here, starting with Tybura, 32% of his wins are by KO, TKO, along with an even amount of submissions at 32% and 8 wins each for both categories. He has won 36% of his fights by decision, currently sitting at 12-7 in the UFC. So not a bad resume by any means. Again, he's won 3 out of his last 4 fights. His most recent win was against Tai Tuivasa. He won by rear naked choke in the first round. Has lost to some pretty legitimate competition, including Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov, to name a few. Those aren't the losses to sweat at. Obviously, Volkov has a pretty important fight coming up in Abu Dhabi against Cyril Gane, which is going to be very, very interesting for the rest of the heavyweight division. That's like an outside wild card fight looking in. You could also say the same thing here. Has also defeated longtime veterans Walt Harris, as well as now BKFC staple Ben Rothwell, who's found success in combat sports, but in another form of competition. So, good for him there. That's the brief overview of Marcin Tybura out of out of Poland. Now we're going to move over to the Moldova, Sergey Spivak, okay, known as the Polar Bear, sitting at 16-4 overall. In MMA, one of the best non-champion heavyweights in the world, currently sitting at number 18 in the Tapa OG heavyweight ranking. So um, no slouch on him, and someone who loves to keep the fight on the feet. 44% of his wins are by KO, TKO. Currently sitting at 7 wins by KO. And he's been knocked out 3 times as well. But he is primarily a submission artist, though. 44% of his wins have come by a submission, with also 7 wins in that category as well. So someone who is no slouch on both sides of the coin there. Currently sitting at 7-4 in the UFC, as I just alluded to, losing to the former UFC interim heavyweight champion and UFC heavyweight title challenger Cyril Gane in his last outing. Has defeated the likes of Derek Lewis, Augusto Sakai, and Greg Hardy. Also has a loss to Tom Aspinall when Tom Aspinall was on his way up the heavyweight rankings. So no slouch there, considering that he is probably the second best heavyweight in the world, and also the best heavyweight out of the UK to this point in time. So very good resume as well. But just to briefly wrap this up, I like Marcin Tybura by decision again. I think he gets it done relatively easily. I think he gets a comfortable lead. Uses his wrestling well. Tries to finish Spivak a couple of times. Spivak is going to survive, and then I'm going to predict that Spivak is going to hurt Tybura midway through the third round. But Tybura is going to survive that, and he'll eventually be well on his way to a decision win, probably a 48-47 decision. I would guess a close fight. We're gonna go 3-2 over the course of 5 rounds. But again, UFC Vegas 95 from the Apex, fully on ESPN. Main card 7 p.m. Eastern, prelims 4 p.m. Pacific, and then for those of you who want to take a week off, it's more than fair because the next week we've got UFC 305, headlined by Dricus Du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. If you want more MMA content, you can go check out the most recent episode of the MMA Outsiders. I was not on this week due to some scheduling rearranging that's going on with the network. You'll be able to hear Tom and Pat take over the controls for all of the news and notes in the world of combat sports. But I will be back next week for a undetermined date of fight study, as well as the newest episode of the MMA Outsiders. So stay tuned for all of that and so much more. We're gonna move on to the NFL. We're gonna briefly discuss the NFL Hall of Fame games. So for those of you guys who don't know, pretty big Chicago Bears fan had Grant Winsauer on last week to do the Banversation. We previewed the Bears-Texans matchup. Obviously, none of the Bears starters played, but they were able to get the win, a close game in a rain delay, 21-14, or excuse me, 21-17. Wanted to help myself there for a second. Good win for the Bears. Nice to see some of the backups play. Had a bunch of nice throws from Pippen. Had a huge game-changing catch down the sideline that really did change the complexion of the game. And even though it's not the Bears team that we're fully excited about, with Caleb Williams and Romans of like that, and none of the new stars or the new pieces or even the return of DJ Moore or anything like that. It was good to see the Bears get the first W, even though it doesn't count. Hopefully, it's the first of many W's, and definitely a great way to showcase on the Pro Football Hall of Fame stage, one of the oldest franchises in professional sports and one of the founding franchises of professional football. Very, very cool to see the NFL do that. And again, like Grant mentioned a week ago, the last time the Bears played in the Hall of Fame game, that was in 2018. They made the playoffs that year, as we all know, and people in Chicago don't like to talk about it, but I'll bring it up. That's the year that the Bears won the NFC North with Mitch Trubisky and one of the best defenses in football, and could not overcome the Philadelphia Eagles. It was the double doink game, unfortunately, with Cody Parkey, and the Bears have yet to recover ever since. Maybe 2024 is the first year that the Bears were able to do that and to get on the comeback trail of being a consistent playoff and Super Bowl contending team. But that remains easier said than done. Going to be now transitioning into the there's week one preseason tilt. They're playing the Bills. Again, this should be interesting. It's going to be the first time, we're going to get to see, Caleb Williams do his thing at quarterback. I don't really have too many expectations going into this game, except I just want to see what Caleb Williams can do. I want to see what he can do at the pro level. It's the preseason. Shouldn't be too nervous. He's probably going to get a couple of series because they don't want to injure him or anything like that. He's the number one overall pick, the face of the franchise. It's a good test for the Bears to see, what are the you obviously got Hard Knocks, which premiered yesterday. You can go check that out, HBO and HBO Max. So excited to watch that. Never thought in my lifetime would my favorite NFL team be part of a Hard Knocks series. So very, very cool there. Again, if you haven't checked it out, you can go to HBO or HBO Max to do so. But let's see how pressure heavy the Bears are. And obviously, this Bills team, is one of the best teams in the NFL. The Bills have yet to reach the Super Bowl under Josh Allen and company. So, they have a huge chip on their shoulder. It's obviously not going to matter for this preseason game, considering that, they're trying to just only play their starters when they're supposed to. But um, this this Bears game should be good. I got them winning a close one. It'll probably be a 24-20 final score, but it's part of a packed slate of preseason action. We're going to get into who else is playing later on in the show. But again, of course, I had to mention Bears Bills. This is going to be a theme on this show as we get into the NFL season, is me previewing and predicting every Bears game as honestly as I possibly can. So very, very excited to discuss that. Speaking of the Hall of Fame, we're going to transition back to that now. Wanted to just go through a recap. So we had three Bears, ex-Bears players enshrined into the Hall of Fame. We had Steve McMichael, who was obviously part of the 1985 Bears Super Bowl 20 team, very, very prominent 40s defense there. He was not in attendance due to an ongoing battle with ALS, a very heartwarming video that was put together by the NFL and narrated by Jared Payton as the McMichael family and his former teammates watched along as he was being presented his jacket and his bust in Canton. So it was very, very cool that the NFL was able to organize that. But we also had Julius Peppers go into the Hall of Fame, and we had Devin Hester go in as well. I grew up watching Devin Hester. I was 6, 7, and 8 years old when Devin Hester was in his prime. Julius Peppers obviously came along a little bit later. He was a huge free agent signing at the time from the Carolina Panthers. Obviously made the Bears defense with Lance Briggs and Brian Urlacher and all those guys into one of the best defenses in football, eventually leading them to the NFC Championship game in 2010, where they lost to the Packers. And of course, and I have a theory that if Jay Cutler never gets hurt and Todd Collins never comes into the game, that the Bears are playing in the Super Bowl against Pittsburgh, and I think Pittsburgh would have won the Super Bowl that year. But that's either here or there. That's revisionist history, because what really happened was Green Bay beat Pittsburgh in Arlington, Texas that year. But nonetheless, very, very cool to see Julius Peppers get in as one of the best, as one of the best defenders the game has ever seen. And of course, no, that's mention the fact too that those three guys getting in, it's cool because it represents a different generations of Bears fans, and I think that's the most interesting part about it. You had the people who grew up with McMichael and with the Super Bowl team, and you had people like myself, who enjoyed certain players, and Devin Hester was certainly one of them. And there is, I'm gonna, if I could bet money, I would say this. I would say there's not going to be another return man like Devin Hester for probably the next 20 to 30 years, because now, or maybe even ever, because now, with these kickoff returns, you very rarely see kickoff returns in the NFL. It used to be way up from what I understand, and now it's near the bottom. The NFL has become a passing league. They're not as concerned about special teams unless you can do the essential things like make field goals and stuff like that. So way ahead of his time at the time for Devin Hester. Again, super proud to see that the greatest kick returner ever is in the Hall of Fame. It was a very good Hall of Fame class, and a bunch of prominent names in this class, including Dwight Freeney being one of the major wins as well. You also had guys from yesteryear like Randy Bradshaw from the Denver Broncos. Also had Andre Johnson from the Houston Texans. Overall, a very good class. No coaches or GMs this year, which was very, very interesting. And then, of course, looking at the ballot for next year, the only guy that I really care about getting in um, next year is Adam Vinatieri, considering that, in my opinion, he's the greatest clutch kicker that the NFL has ever seen. That's going to wrap it up for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now we're going to move into recapping PFL Nashville. So the PFL had their first leg of the postseason. We had the women's flyweights and the heavyweights take center stage. 10-fight card. I went 4-6 on this card, bringing my record for PFL Bellator combined to 171. So not the greatest night of predictions for me, but I did successfully get a few of these correct, including the main event, which saw Dennis Goldsoff absolutely dominate in his win to advance to the finals as he was supposed to do. The was something that I was very interested in seeing is, could the pressure get to him? And obviously, of course, it did not there. So that was nice to see. And of course, and of course, I think that I think the matchups have a chance. I think the matchups have a chance to be good. I mean, we've got three legs of fights to go through. Obviously, we have a week off this week, and then they go to Hollywood, Florida. That'll be an interesting week as well. And now that I'm thinking about it, okay, here we go. I got it now. So, with that being said, too, just wanted to remind you guys as well before I get more into this. Unfortunately, for those of you who have been following the PFL postseason for a while, the date is still going to be Black Friday, but it is more than likely going to be a during the day card, considering that those fights are now going to no longer be in DC. They're going to be moved to Saudi Arabia. So just something to keep in mind is as that Saudi Arabia partnership continues. So we had Dennis Goldsoff defeating Tim Johnson, very, very impressive TKO win there, and then we had Oleg Popov winning a interesting fight, to say the least, against Linton Vassell. Linton Vassell obviously taking that fight on short notice, wasn't really expecting too much. So I do think I guess you could say I do think in those scenarios the fighters who everyone thought would win did. The big surprise for me, though, came on the women's side, seeing Liz Carmouche lose to Tyler Santos, just considering that Carmouche has been a staple of the Bellator flyweight division for a couple of years now. Obviously, was the one of the first two women in UFC history to ever participate in the UFC's inaugural women's fight. That was Ronda Rousey, Liz Carmouche at UFC 157 in February of 2013. So again, very, very good for Tyler there. Was just very surprised. I thought that, Carmouche's championship experience would be too much. I thought she was kind of seated incorrectly. It's to be quite honest with you, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes when it comes to the standings. So not much you can do about it there. So with that being said, the heavyweight final, we'll see Dennis Goldsoff, the number 1 seed, take on Oleg Popov. Then, of course, taking a look at the women's flyweight final, we're gonna have Dakota Dacheva take on Tyler Santos, and Dacheva made it look super easy in a very nice win over Jenna Bishop. I clearly underestimated her in that regard, so it was very, very good to see that that the postseason fights went kind of the way that I thought it would. But I will say, though, the only major downside from this card is that the pacing was too long. It took a long time to complete the main card, and hopefully the PFL can learn from their mistakes, come back and do the Florida card in a little bit more of a smoother fashion. Again, we got Florida a week from Friday, and then the following week we got a card in Washington, D.C. before we move over to the championship stage of everything. Now we're going to move on, because I know we only have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to move over to Zinger. We have 3 Zingers this week. We're going to try to keep them as brief as possible. And if you want more of my analysis, you can check out some of the teasers that I will post later on in the week, probably Thursday or Friday would be my guess for a bunch of them. So we're going to get started with the first one, which is that Michigan football is going to be just fine. So as we all know, there's been some information that's come out about the sign stealing scandal. We have Jim Harbaugh making his statement. We have a bunch of other things that are going on behind the scenes that's really causing concern. But I do think that Michigan is going to be okay. And the reason why I think Michigan is going to be okay is because whenever you look at scandals like this, whenever you look at who's at fault and who's not at fault, you always have to look at who it's impacting. It's impacting every person in the program, whether past, present, or future, because every single person has an impact from the person before them, right? So, with that being said, something that I think people need to understand is there were plenty of people that weren't involved in any of this. There were plenty of players that more than likely didn't seemingly know that this was occurring. Okay. So the one thing that I don't think we should do in this scenario is blame the players. We should blame the people involved here. And the main person involved was Sharon Moore. Dude, really? 52 deleted text messages, man. You had to know something fishy was going on when Connor Stallions would purchase tickets to random games to scout what Michigan should do in the weeks to follow. My thought is I think this is going to blow over. This is Michigan. They just won the national championship. They're going to try to save face. September 7th is exactly a month away when this is dropping. And that's critical because it's the start of a huge weekend for Michigan. They play Texas. It's their opening game of the season at the Big House. Very, very important game. It's Texas's SEC introduction, but not a conference. There's too much at stake to ruin what is going to be the first big noon kickoff game, or as I should say, the first major big noon kickoff game. I'm sorry, I can't buy that this is fully on everybody involved. I can only say what I know, and I know that if Jerome Moore and Connor Stallions are the main scapegoats in this, we need to do a better job of protecting the people who had nothing to do with it. And it's clear to me that most of these players, if not all of them, had no knowledge of the situation. And obviously, the guys that have moved on to the NFL, they're not going to say anything about it because they're too focused on their careers and what they have going on and so much more. So just something to keep in mind there. I do think that Michigan football is going to be okay. Um, they're going to go through their season. What will happen with sanctions? I don't really know, but I do hope for the sake of everybody involved that the wins still stay put because again, sign stealing is not something that's against the rules, but it's the way you go about it that I think people are it's the way you go about it that I think people are questioning. So just something to keep in mind there. Gonna move right along over to now the UFC Sphere ticket prices. So I've been tracking this almost every single day because I'm obsessed with this card and how it's gonna look on TV and the whole thing. And I keep checking. And it had been about a week since I checked. I checked Sunday night, a couple different sources, Ticketmaster, StubHub, etc., etc. The cheapest price that I have found for the Sphere is 1,757. That could very well have easily changed, as the most expensive ticket that I saw was north of 16 grand. Plain and simple, UFC Sphere tickets are not affordable. You can't justify to me that this card is worth the money that the UFC and these ticket companies are saying it is because I get it. Sean O'Malley's a big star. They're trying to push him. He's a huge, Vegas, Boston main event headliner. I get it. They want to attract the casual audience. I've been a Sean O'Malley fan since 2017 when he had his viral knockout on the regional scene before moving over to DWCS. I've known about Sean O'Malley before really anybody knew who Sean O'Malley was. And now Sean O'Malley is one of the biggest stars, not just in MMA but in sports period. I get it. I get it. They want to put him on a big card. More power to them. But when you look at the lineup that the UFC has, especially when you consider there's 5 main card fights and 5 prelims and 2 championship fights, really only 4 notable names, maybe 5 if you include Raul Rosas Jr., considering that he's ignited that market in the last couple of years. There really aren't a ton of fights, in my opinion, that justify spending this kind of money when on the same night you can get into Canelo versus Berlanga for under $500. So I did allude to this in the video. So if you haven't seen the video, go check it out. But I'm going to say something similar here. If you are planning to go to Vegas, please do so wisely and please do your best to consider how much money you would actually be spending, because I think the most logical thing to do is to go to Vegas and go to at least one show. If you're gonna go all in on one, you gotta pick one. If it was me, and it's just given my previous experience, I've been to 11 UFC events. I was already at UFC St. Louis. If I was going to Las Vegas, I would only go for Canelo versus Berlanga, and I would maybe go for a UFC fight night later that week or something like that. I would go do something to make the most of it. I would at least go to one show. I think if you're going to the UFC for the first time, and the Sphere is the star of the show, and you saved up all your money, I would go for it. But as someone who's been to some of the biggest fights in recent memory, including Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 3, which is also in Las Vegas, and to be fully transparent, ticket prices were nowhere near what the Sphere is costing. Um, I think it's hard to justify, especially if you've been someone who's gone to several events of that stature. But if it's your first one and you've saved up all this money, I as the old saying goes, is you only live once. So it's going to be interesting to see what people decide to do. But it's also interesting to see the Dana White said to Kevin Iole earlier a couple days ago that this card, the tickets purchased so far is 12% people from Mexico, which I think is very cool, considering that the branding that they're trying to do around this event and stuff. So we have about a month to go till that card. I'll keep you posted on if I eventually decide to pull the trigger and go to Vegas for at least a little bit. But if not, it'll probably be sometime later this year or early 2025. But nonetheless, still a very interesting story to follow. I still think they're unaffordable, but keep checking ticket prices, see what you can find, and just pull the trigger on a seat and see what you can do if that's what you are really seeking, or if you are a member of the media who has UFC access but is yet to cover an event. This might be one to consider putting a credential in for, because I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in attending and covering it. And the final zinger, very, very brief here. I'm not a White Sox fan by any means, but at the time that we're recording this, they've lost 21 consecutive games in a row. This is just a brutal state. I mean, it's the second longest losing streak in modern baseball history, which I think is something, or it has the potential to be, if you and they also have the potential to still obtain the worst record of all time, but they still have a little bit more work to do there. But still, this is not a good situation. They've pretty much gotten rid of everybody at the trade deadline. Pedro Garfal has his team in just total disarray. Does not know what to say to the media on a night-to-night basis. There's literally no words for every single loss that this team has had. And coming from a prided city like Chicago, it's just disappointing to see a team that has so much history and so much rich tradition and whatnot, and it has a mystique to it, and that logo and the whole thing. It's truly frustrating, and I don't know what it's like to be a White Sox fan, because I'm not one. I'm a fan of the team on the north side, who's still not doing very well in their current regime. Has not been really a winning team since about 2016. Hasn't made the playoffs in several years now. Both Chicago baseball teams are bad, but simply put, the White Sox need to throw in the towel. They got to get rid of everyone. They got to start over. I don't know what they're going to do this offseason, but I think people have a right to be truly disappointed that this team, to me, just on an overall level, is fragmented and just does not care. And now you got, guaranteed rate field doing everything they can to get people in the building, and yet it's still not working. You can go to games for dirt cheap, as low as potentially some minor league baseball teams, which is really sad to say. But we're gonna keep tabs on this. Again, the number is 21 losses in a row now. Can they make it to 30 losses in a row? That would be interesting. They're doing the inverse of what the A's did in the early 2000s, which is where they won 20 plus games in a row after being near the bottom of the AL West standings. If you haven't watched Moneyball, I kind of gave half the movie away, but no, nonetheless, it's still interesting. It's still August 7th. We still have about a month of the season to go. Let's see how poorly the White Sox finish. But right now, they're on pace to lose over 100 games, which is just a microcosm of what this team could have been pre-COVID, but never turned into. So we're going to wrap things up here just really quick. Which and to look ahead, we're going to briefly do the NFL over/under win total projections for the NFC South. We're going to try to do we're going to try to do as much as we can with this segment to make it a little bit more expanded. So just getting into here, we're going to do NFL over/under totals, and then obviously after this, we're going to move on to just briefly discuss some Olympic stuff and just briefly how to watch every preseason game, which won't take very long. But NFL over/under projections for the NFC South. So obviously we have the Falcons, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Saints, and the Bucks. Again, a decently interesting division, but something tells me though, Tampa Bay is going to hit their over projection. I just think they're the best team out of the four, and then it'll probably go something like, I don't know. I would say probably New Orleans in second, Atlanta in third, and Carolina in fourth. I just can't justify I can justify that Panthers team and Bryce Young doing anything substantial. They've added some pieces to the roster, but I just think that Baker Mayfield and company are too good. So if I were to get my own over/under win total projections here, we're gonna go. Bucks will probably get about over 8.5 wins. I'm gonna say New Orleans probably around over 7.5 wins. Atlanta, I would say they'll probably hit the under 7.5, and then whatever the Panthers under is, which is probably 3.5 or 4.5. I'll probably take that as well. The NFC South to me seems like the easiest division to predict, but then again, the NFC South was so putrid last year that it could end up being a recurring theme. So just something to keep in mind. But still, I think the Bucks win the NFC South, get in as one of the wild card teams, and maybe win another playoff game. Have a very similar season to what they had in 2023. So just keeping that in mind as well. Just a reminder too regarding the Olympics, we're wrapping things up here. We've got the closing ceremony coming up this weekend. We have some final events coming up. But by the time this records, and by the time it gets released in the next couple of days, we'll have a gold medal champion for basketball. We have a lot of stuff going on the Olympic front. Just to give you the quick Olympic medal count at the time that we're recording this, we're only going to go through a couple of countries because we have very little time remaining. So China is sitting in first, or excuse me, this is kind of this is bizarre. Google doesn't do this right. So we've got the Republic of China leading with 22 gold medals, this is according to Olympics.com. United States with 21, France and Australia tied with 13, Great Britain with 12, the Republic of Korea has 11, Japan has 10, Italy has 9, Germany has 8, and the Netherlands have 7. Those are the top 10. So the United States could still edge out China. It's going to be interesting to see what events they do it in. But again, NBC, USA Network, or any of the NBC affiliates, go on and look. And just a small plug, as you know, I'm part of the affiliate and commercial content team for the Sporting News. We have a hour-long read. That's right, an hour-long read of the updated schedule of events on a nightly basis. We've been pumping out a ton of Olympics content. So if you need an up-to-the-minute, up-to-the-day schedule of everything that's going on in Olympic sports. You can do so literally right now by going to sportingnews.com and clicking on the Olympics section, and the schedule should be probably right on the homepage. I would assume so. Just something to keep in mind for those who need quick access to Olympic schedules. You can do so right away. Final topic of this show before we wrap up the show today. We're going to go over NFL preseason week 1. So I'm going to give you the schedule for the first week of the NFL preseason. We have a couple of games taking place in week 1. It's not a crazy big slate, but I figured I would go through it. So preseason week 1 in the NFL, and it's exciting that we've been talking about it. So let's go through it. So Thursday night, we got 2 games Thursday night, and this sounds like a typical week 1 preseason Thursday night. So we got Carolina going to New England to take on the Patriots. That's at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. We got Detroit taking on the New York Giants. But either way, the Panthers-Patriots game is on NFL Network. Detroit and the Giants does not have a TV designation, but I would assume you could watch that game on NFL Plus. Then you have a huge slate on Friday. You've got the Falcons taking on the Dolphins. That's Atlanta going to Miami. Pittsburgh hosting Houston. The Ravens hosting the Eagles. And just as a heads up, Pittsburgh and Houston, it's on NFL Network. Philadelphia, Baltimore, it's on NFL Plus. You have that. The Jets are taking on the Commanders. That's on NFL Plus. The Bears are taking on the Bills. That's on one of the NFL Network and NFL Plus games as well. We got the Raiders taking on the Minnesota Vikings. We also have the Packers taking on the Browns. We've got the Bengals taking on Tampa Bay. San Francisco taking on Tennessee. Kansas City taking on Jacksonville. Seattle taking on the Chargers. New Orleans taking on Arizona. And then we close the weekend on Sunday with Denver at Indianapolis at 1 p.m. Eastern. Then, of course, the Chargers and the Cowboys at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. So a pretty solid slate. There's lines on all these games if you want to bet on them. I don't know why you would. It's preseason football. All the over-unders. I think I'm doing the quick scan here. All the over-unders are under 40 points. So if you are a under better, this might be the stretch for you. That's going to wrap it up for Bando's Breakdowns, episode 16. Sorry I went on a little bit of the longer side today, but again, just wanted to thank all of you guys for checking out the show. It really is greatly appreciated. One of the highlights of my week is to be able to do this show and to tell you guys my thoughts on everything going on in the world of sports. So again, thank you so much for your time and listening. And just to give you a quick heads up that episode 17 is going to be at a special day and time because of switch ups within the network, as I alluded to earlier in the show. Episode 17 will air Tuesday, August 13th at the same time as the Wednesday time slot, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Should have a lot of fun stuff to cover. They're both on the Olympics front, giving my further preview and analysis of UFC 305 and so much more. Should be a very exciting show. Just wanted to quickly remind you guys before we get out of here, be sure to listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, going to the YouTube feed, and so much more. You can also use YouTube Premium and still listen to it on the go. A nice little tidbit for you guys there if you want to do that. And speaking of YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/ETP Network. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to like the video. Be sure to hit the notification bell. That way, the algorithm always recognizes this show and every other show on the network. You can even find a playlist of every episode if you want to go back. I can check it out. So again, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe there. Just wanted to give one more quick shout out that this podcast is presented by Playback. Again, you can go to playback.tv/ETV Network to find out more, including our live stream Olympic schedule and eventually all of the other fall sports content that we will have coming up. So for everybody at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, I am Zain, and this has been another production of and those breakdowns. Again, this was episode 16. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I can't wait for next week in episode 17. But until then, enjoy the Olympics, enjoy the fights, and I will talk to you guys next week. Happy August, everyone. Have a good one.